Hey guys, I'm back. Well, the beginning of this new year's kind of been different, I've been super busy in my job, my day job, and just kind of like reevaluating what I want out of life. Um, but I was reading in the Word and I was in John, and it's funny how it talks about Judas in the Bible because there's only certain snippets that we see of Judas Iscariot. And most people, even non believers, know who Judas Iscariot is. He is the one that betrayed Jesus and ultimately sent him to the cross. Even though we know Jesus' plan and why he was sent here was to go to the cross to die for us, um, Judas was kind of the catalyst in that situation and basically propelled that forward. I mean, the Pharisees already didn't like Jesus, but Judas was kind of the scapegoat that threw him in the fire a little bit. So, but I think it's kind of interesting when we think about Judas because you really need to be aware of who your friends are. Jesus talks about that a lot, being aware of your surroundings, what example do you set, not necessarily in those words, but what is your behavior? How are you acting? Don't let people find you in these certain situations, which that's also in Luke. He talks about that. But what I kind of want to focus on is I'm going to read part of John 13 where it talks about Jesus predicting his betrayal and then Jesus predicting Peter's denial. And then I'm going to jump back and forth a little bit between John and Luke and kind of look at the correlations. So just roll with me on this. We're kind of uh, freestyle preaching this time. Okay, so John 13, verse 8. Or sorry, verse 18. My bad. I am not saying these things to all of you. I know so very well each of you I chose. Now, the beginning of this heading in this is Jesus predicting his betrayal. But I think it's really significant that that first verse says, I am not saying these things to all of you. I know so well each of you that I chose. First of all, we are chosen. We are all selected by God and predestined. There are people that have controversial views about predestination, but it's pretty clear in the Bible that predestination is a thing. But I think it's really interesting that he plain as day says, I'm not saying these things to all of you. Okay. The scriptures declare, the one who shares my food has turned against me. I was having this conversation with one of my really good friends the other day. I'm going through something right now in my personal life, and in regards to just some of the relationships I have in my life, and it's kind of like someone that you eat with. See, eating is very significant, not just in the Bible, but culturally. Who you eat with matters because when you choose to go eat with somebody, food is life to us. Water is life to us because that's what sustains our body. So when you choose to invite somebody in to something that gives life to you, and I don't mean like metaphorically, emotionally, like your passions in life. I don't mean that. I literally am talking about the physical sustaining thing, food and water, or food and drink, whatever. When you invite somebody into those situations of your life, that's extremely significant. I don't choose to eat with somebody that I don't like. That's what makes Jesus so significant is he chose to eat with tax collectors, sinners, prostitutes, all those kinds of things, people that are undesirable to the world. And as our flesh, we don't choose to eat with people we don't like. That's just how we are. Jesus calls us to something different, to invite those people in, but that's a whole other sermon in itself. But just track with me on this. So when you invite somebody to eat with you or share time with you like that, that's a very significant thing. The one who shares my food has turned against me. When you look down on the footnote about that, it talks about how, like in Psalms 41, which I'll just read it for you because instead of cliff notesing it, let's just read it. Psalms 41. is basically the foreshadowing for Jesus coming because it's Old Testament. Even my best friend. That's how this verse starts. Even my best friend, the one I trusted completely, the one who I share my food with, has turned against me. I find that so significant because when you observe somebody, see, actions speak louder than words. When you observe somebody that says, "Oh, I don't appreciate that person or whatever," but then you see them eating with them or you seeing spending time with them, that's a different response than what their words are saying. I know that sounds really vague and weird, but I guess I'm trying to say it in a way where your time that you spend with that person in your life moments, that impacts you. So let's keep going. So it says, and this will soon come true. I will tell you this now, so that when it happens, you will believe that I am the Messiah. Truly, anyone who welcomes my messenger is welcoming me, which the messenger is the Holy Spirit. And anyone who welcomes me is welcoming the Father who sent me. So that's a Trinity moment where Jesus is talking about the messenger, Holy Spirit. He is speaking himself as Jesus, and then also talking about the welcoming the Father. So I think that's a really neat kind of Holy Spirit Trinity moment. Now, Jesus was in great anguish of spirit. Okay, so that's the cool thing about Jesus is Jesus knows. Jesus knows. So great anguish comes over him. And he says, the truth is one of you will betray me. Jesus just calls it out. He's sitting there with his disciples because this is right after he just washed all their feet. Mind you, he washed Judas's feet. Okay, it's in here. Doesn't say anything about him kicking Judas out. So the person that he shares his food with, Judas, the person that's going to betray him, Judas, he washed his feet. Now, yes, Peter denies Jesus, but that's very different than betraying Jesus. Hear me out. The disciples looked at each other, wondering whom he could mean. One of Jesus's disciples, the one Jesus loved. I love that John just calls himself out as, I'm the disciple Jesus loved. I love John. John's a good guy. Sounds like something I'd say, to be honest. Was sitting next to Jesus at the table. Simon Peter motioned to him to ask who would do this terrible thing. Leaning toward Jesus. Leaning into Jesus. That's what we're supposed to do, everyone. Lean into Jesus. This is how you're going to get insight into the relationships of your life. That's a very small little verse, but leaning towards Jesus. Just track with me on that. He asked, Lord, who is it? Now, mind you, Peter's on the right roll. He's asking the Lord who's going to cause this, which even though Jesus is sitting right there with him, that's what we're supposed to do in our own lives. In the people that you stay with, the people that you are friends with, associate with, allow to speak into your life, you need to be asking God about these people. You need to be having conversations with Jesus about these people and praying for them. Jesus said, is it the one whom I give the bread dipped in the sauce? Oh, I'm sorry. I read that totally wrong. Verse 26, Jesus said, it is the one whom I give the bread dipped in the sauce, which basically is probably oil or like balsamic. And when he had dipped it, he gave it to Judas, son of Simon Iscariot. Which, if you ever do a little side kind of research commentary kind of thing on Judas and his family line, it's really interesting. It's really interesting. Maybe I'll do a sermon about that. It's very interesting looking back on Judas's family line and how generational sin affects people and generational relationships. And he says, dipped it, and he gave it to Judas, son of Simon Iscariot. This is very significant. Verse 27 matters, so track with this. As soon as Judas had eaten the bread Satan entered into him. Okay, that verse has always scared me, even as a young child. The idea that Satan entered into someone, which we know demons have that power and we know demonic forces and all that stuff. And I take all that very seriously. That's why I don't smile, laugh, or have any kind of other than a serious reaction when I talk about dark forces. When Satan entered into Judas, that's terrifying. You need to be super aware of the people you're around. And I don't mean like all of them have, demon forces in them and stuff like that, but their motives, what are their motives? What are they serving? Because anything you're serving that is not God is of the enemy. Come on, it's true. Anything that you are serving that isn't the Lord is of the adversary. It's true. God's black and white that way. Life is black and white that way. You're either serving yourself or you're serving God. You're either serving somebody else or you're serving you. The way I first said that was weird. But you get what I'm saying. If you're serving anything other than God, it isn't of God. It might be created by God, but it isn't of God. Then Jesus told him, hurry, do it now. That's such a trip to me that Jesus literally, after he knew that Satan entered into Judas, he looked at him and goes, hurry, just go do it. Just go do it now. I already know. Just do it. Have you ever done that? Have you ever called out someone in your life, one of your friends, or somebody that was kind of like what they classify now as a frenemy? Have you ever called someone out like that? I have. I do it more than I'd like to admit. When I know that something is going on behind my back, I have Jesus moments like that where I'll go, just go do it. Just go get it over with. It catches people off guard. When you call them out, it catches people off guard. Because see, look what happens. None of the others at the table knew what Jesus meant. That's what happens. When you aren't on top of the people in your life, and I don't mean like in a kind of like shady or paranoid way. I'm not talking about that. When you are not on track or have the same mindset or of one accord with somebody, that's the best hand motion I can give you. But like if you're not intertwined with somebody and really, of one heart, I guess. That sounds so cliche and corny, but I think you guys know what I mean. It shows. And other people are not going to understand what's going on around you if they are not in tune. And that's why being close to the Holy Spirit and being close to the Lord is so important, because then you develop discernment. And discernment is what protects you. I mean, God ultimately protects you, but that's the tool he uses, because that's the voice in your head. That's the conscience. That's all of those things that the Holy Spirit equips us with to protect us and enrich our relationships. Sorry, that's my soapbox. Judas now since Judas was their treasurer. Okay, so the word treasurer, we know what treasurer is, in charge of the money, the funds, all that kind of stuff in those situations. But that word treasure is really significant. He's in charge of the treasure, the money, the gift, how they expand the gift. Think about that. Some thought Jesus was telling him to go pay for the food or to give money to the poor. So Judas left at once, going out into the night. Darkness. Some people are never going to like you. There are some people that are always going to come after you or pine to make your life harder, all those kinds of things. I have several people like that in my life right now. And it's because the light in you burns the darkness in them. I'm going to say that again. The light in you burns the darkness in them, because light extinguishes darkness. You can't have both. It's either dark or it's light out. There is no other. There just isn't. You can have little lights in the darkness, but it's still dark. It's either one or the other. So Judas left at once, going out into the night. Okay. Now, verse 31, when Jesus predicts Peter's denial, as soon as Judas left the room, sometimes people need to leave the room in your life. Sometimes people need to leave the room to make room. Come on, track with me on this. Sometimes some people need to leave the room to allow you to see some things. You'll see what I mean. Jesus said, "The time has come for me. The Son of Man will enter into my glory, and God will receive glory because of all that happens to me. And God will bring me into glory very soon. Dear children." Okay, now we're changing how Jesus is talking. Because all throughout this, when he's washing their feet, he doesn't call them dear children. Judas is in the room. Judas is in the room. And then when you go back to verse 13, it talks about Satan had already enticed Judas. Okay, think about that. And then Jesus isn't calling them dear children. They're just his disciples. They're still his friends. But now he switches. Dear children, how brief are these moments before I must go away and leave you? Then, though you search for me, you cannot come to me, just as I told the Jewish leaders. So now I'm giving you a new commandment. Love each other, just as I have loved you. You should love each other. Your love for one another will prove to the world that you are my disciples. And then it's going to go on down, and Judas is basically going to tell Peter that, no, you're going to deny me when the rooster cows 3 times. But all of that jumbled together, what I'm saying is, be aware. Be very aware. We are in a different time in the world. We are in a different time in society. And the people around you may not always have your best interests at heart, which that's true in any part of life or generation or situation. But that's why you need to be like Peter and lean towards Jesus. Lean towards Jesus. Because sometimes some people may need to leave the room to make it easier for you to lean towards Jesus. Because once Judas left the room, then they could absorb what God was saying to them. Does that make sense? I hope so. And then we go over here, because I told you we'd jump to Luke real quick. When you go to Luke and it talks about Judas agreeing to betray Jesus. So the Jewish leaders basically asked Judas to betray Jesus, ultimately, for 30 pieces of silver. The leading priests and teachers of religious law, this is verse 2 of Luke 22, were actively plotting Jesus' murder. There they are in the darkness, on the outskirts, plotting. But they wanted to kill him without starting a riot, and possibly a possibility they greatly feared, because nothing is more scary than a bunch of people on the same side uproared about injustice. Just saying. Then Satan entered into Judas Iscariot. Scary. That's that verse every single time. Who was one of the 12 disciples, and he went over to the leading priests and captains of the temple guard to discuss the best way to betray Jesus to them. Now, mind you, Judas didn't approach the Jewish leaders until Satan entered into him. Okay? You never approach to do something to hurt somebody else until your focus is away from the light. It's true. When you're faced towards darkness, your mindset is different. You're on edge. You're fearful. Darkness can be scary no matter where you are. The light, everybody knows when it's sunny outside. Everybody wants to go outside, go play, go do fun things. It's different. It's different. Just think about even the natural, vitamin D levels in your brain. I mean, even the basic of that. Light and darkness are very, very different things. Verse 5, I'm sorry. They were delighted when he was ready to help them. Delighted. Be careful what you delight in. Be careful who you delight in too. And so they promised him a reward. So he began looking for an opportunity to betray Jesus so they could arrest him quietly when the crowds weren't around. I think that's interesting. Don't let the day catch you unaware, as in a trap. That's more pertaining to, when Jesus comes back and all that kind of stuff. But I guess what I want to leave you guys with is the idea of discernment and being aware. If you are not aware, I mean, what happens when you're caught off guard? Things happen. Bad things happen when you are caught off guard. And I'm not telling you to live in a state of fear or live in a state of paranoia or on edge or super stressed out or cortisol is pumping through your body like crazy. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying when you live in a state of awareness in terms of the word and in terms of a relationship of leaning into Jesus, then things work out. Things work out. There's someone really significant in my life that always says, do the right thing. Do the right thing. And I always think about that. Do the right thing. But what is the right thing? What is the right thing? The right thing looks different in all situations. But the ultimate purpose of the right thing is the good thing. Is good. The word good. And Jesus is good. And when you lean into goodness, when you lean into Jesus, that's how you learn to do the right thing. I hope all my jumbled freestyle preaching made sense. And I hope you guys have the best week. See you guys later.